Billionaires aren't scared of losing money. They aren't terrified of facing competition. And they certainly don't lose sleep over failure, because failure for them is simply part of the process. What truly haunts them is something much more subtle, something invisible, something most people don't even realize exists. It's not an external enemy, but an internal one. And almost every billionaire, from Warren Buffett to Jeff Bezos, fears this single mental habit more than financial collapse. Think about it for a moment. Why would someone with billions of dollars in the bank, a fleet of private jets, or an empire stretching across the globe be afraid of anything at all? Money can buy security, power, and influence, but money cannot protect them from their own minds. This invisible habit doesn't strike overnight. It creeps in silently. It hides behind success, disguises itself as comfort, and feels harmless at first. That's why it's so dangerous. Billionaires know that it can destroy everything they've worked for, not by taking their wealth away directly, but by weakening the very mindset that created that wealth in the first place. And here's the truth. It's not just billionaires who are vulnerable. You and I face this same hidden threat every single day. It's the reason people abandon their dreams halfway. It's the reason promising businesses collapse even before reaching their peak. And it's the reason why so many talented individuals never realize their full potential. So what is this mental habit? Why is it powerful enough to terrify the richest people on the planet? And most importantly, how can you make sure it doesn't take control of your own life? In the next few minutes, we'll take a deep dive into the psychology of the ultra-wealthy. We'll explore the silent force they fear most, the ways it has destroyed billion-dollar empires, and how you can avoid falling into the same trap. Because once you understand this, you'll see success and even failure in a completely different way. At first glance, billionaires might seem like they belong to another world, jet-setting on private planes, living in glass-walled mansions, and investing in ideas that sound impossible to the average person. But the true difference between billionaires and the rest of us is not their money. It's their mindset. And nowhere is this contrast more visible than in how they approach risk, decisions, and the unseen battles inside their own minds. Most people are naturally risk-averse. From a young age, society teaches us to avoid mistakes, play it safe, and never lose what we already have. For the average person, risk feels like danger. Losing a job, failing at a business, or making the wrong decision often carries a sense of permanent damage. But for billionaires, risk is not danger, it's opportunity. Take Elon Musk as an example. When he invested his last remaining millions into Tesla and SpaceX after selling PayPal, he faced a terrifying reality. Both companies were on the verge of collapse. For most people, holding on to that fortune and living a comfortable life would have been the logical choice. Musk, however, saw risk differently. To him, failure wasn't the end of the road. It was simply a step towards something bigger. Instead of asking, "What do I lose if this fails?" he asked, "What do I gain if this succeeds?" That single difference in mindset separates those who play small from those who reshape industries. But risk alone doesn't explain everything. The second major difference lies in decision-making. Billionaires have trained themselves to make fast, clear choices under extreme pressure, where most people hesitate, overthink, or wait for the perfect time. Billionaires act. They understand that speed often matters more than perfection. Elon Musk's approach at SpaceX is a clear example of this. Instead of spending years perfecting rocket designs on paper, Musk insisted on rapid iteration. Build, test, fail, improve. Rockets exploded, millions were lost, but each failure brought them closer to success. Today, SpaceX is not only profitable, but also the global leader in space exploration, a position no one thought possible 2 decades ago. This kind of clarity doesn't come from luck. It comes from training the mind to filter noise, focus on what truly matters, and move forward even when uncertainty is overwhelming. The average person waits until every detail is certain. Billionaires act while the details are still uncertain, because they know certainty never truly comes. And here's where the real secret begins to surface. For all their risk-taking and quick decision-making, billionaires recognize that their greatest enemy isn't competition, governments or markets. Their greatest enemy is internal. It's not about who's building the next company. Down the street, it's about the mental traps that can quietly take root inside their own minds. Think about it. Money can shield them from almost every external threat. They can hire the best lawyers, buy the best security, and recruit the smartest people. But no amount of wealth can buy freedom from their own thoughts, habits, or beliefs. Billionaires understand that if they lose control of their mindset, they lose everything. Because mindset is the foundation upon which their empires are built. This is why the mental battles billionaires face are so fascinating. The world sees their wealth, their possessions, their power. But what we don't see is the invisible fight happening behind closed doors, the fight against a single mental habit that can slowly destroy their clarity, their drive, and eventually their success. And it is this habit, more than financial loss or market crashes, that keeps them awake at night. In the next chapter, we'll reveal what this invisible mental habit actually is, and why billionaires fear it more than anything else. So what is this invisible enemy that billionaires fear more than bankruptcy, competition, or failure? It's not laziness, it's not greed, it's not even arrogance. The real danger is something much more subtle: mental complacency. Mental complacency is the silent habit of settling. It's when people stop questioning their own beliefs, routines, and decisions. On the surface, it doesn't look harmful. In fact, it often disguises itself as comfort, security, or even confidence. But underneath, it quietly destroys progress. Here's the simplest way to understand it. Complacency is the moment you stop asking, "What's next?" and start believing, "This is enough." It's the point where growth slows down because the hunger for improvement fades away. For billionaires, this is far scarier than losing money, because once complacency takes hold, it eats away at the very mindset that created wealth in the first place. Why do billionaires fear it more than bankruptcy? Because bankruptcy is temporary, but complacency is permanent. A billionaire can lose billions in a market crash and rebuild again within a few years. But if they lose their ability to challenge themselves, question their own strategies, and push beyond comfort, they've lost the foundation of success itself. Money can be regained. A stagnant mind cannot. The danger of complacency can be seen in countless business stories, but perhaps the most famous is the fall of Blockbuster and the rise of Netflix. In the early 2000s, Blockbuster was a giant. With thousands of stores across the world, it dominated the home entertainment industry. People rented DVDs from its shelves every weekend. At its peak, Blockbuster was worth billions and seemed untouchable. But then came Netflix. At first, a tiny mail-order DVD company with a vision of streaming movies online. When Netflix proposed a partnership in 2000, Blockbuster's executives laughed them out of the room. They believed their business model was too strong to be threatened by such a small, unproven company. They were comfortable. They assumed their customers would never abandon the weekend trip to the video store. They believed success was permanent. In other words, they fell victim to complacency. Netflix, on the other hand, embraced adaptability. Instead of clinging to DVDs, they looked ahead. They questioned their own model and asked, what will entertainment look like in the future? That constant questioning, that refusal to settle, allowed Netflix to pivot into streaming at the perfect time. Today, Netflix is a multi-billion-dollar global powerhouse, while Blockbuster is a relic of the past, reduced to a single nostalgic store in Oregon. This is the lesson billionaires carry with them. Success is fragile, and complacency kills faster than competition. Blockbuster didn't collapse because it lacked money or market share. It collapsed because it stopped evolving. It stopped questioning its own strategies. It got too comfortable. Billionaires understand that the higher you climb, the more dangerous complacency becomes. Success itself becomes the trap. When you've achieved more than most people can even imagine, The temptation to relax is enormous. But that's exactly when complacency strikes, when it whispers, "You've already won, you can stop now." To the average person, this sounds harmless. What's wrong with enjoying your success? But to billionaires, it's the beginning of decline, because the moment they stop moving forward, competitors overtake them. The world changes, industries shift, technology evolves, and complacency blinds them to all of it. This is why billionaires fear complacency more than bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is external, a number in a bank account. But complacency is internal. It lives in the mind, and once it takes root, it spreads quietly, eating away at ambition, clarity, and drive. That's why the richest people in the world constantly push themselves, challenge their own ideas, and even disrupt their own businesses before someone else does. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into the psychology behind complacency. Why does the brain naturally drift toward it? And why is it so much harder to fight than fear, stress, or even failure itself? Why is complacency so dangerous? And why does it creep in so easily, even among the smartest people on the planet? The answer lies deep in the psychology of the human brain. No matter how ambitious we are, our minds are wired to seek one thing above all else: comfort. The brain naturally creates what psychologists call comfort zones. These are safe spaces where routines are predictable, risks are minimized, and uncertainty is avoided. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Thousands of years ago, staying inside a comfort zone meant survival. It meant avoiding dangerous environments, predators, and unnecessary risks. But in today's world, where progress and innovation are essential, that same instinct can become a silent killer of growth. For billionaires, comfort zones are the enemy. Success itself often becomes the ultimate comfort zone. After reaching the top, the temptation to relax and believe "I've made it" is overwhelming. But here's the psychological trap. Big wins create blind spots. When everything is going well, the brain starts ignoring warning signs. Success feeds confidence, but too much confidence blinds judgment. History is full of examples of billion-dollar companies that fell victim to this illusion of success. One of the most famous cases is Nokia. In the early 2000s, Nokia was the undisputed king of mobile phones. They controlled nearly 40% of the global market, selling millions of devices worldwide. Their brand was trusted, their technology respected, and their market dominance unquestioned. But then came the smartphone revolution. Apple introduced the iPhone, and Google launched Android. Instead of adapting, Nokia's leaders ignored the threat. They believed their success was permanent, that customers would never leave a brand so established. What happened next is history. Within a few years, Nokia's market share collapsed. Once a global leader, the company was reduced to a shadow of its former self. The problem wasn't lack of money, technology, or resources. It was complacency. Nokia leaders stayed inside their comfort zone, blinded by past victories. The same story played out with Kodak. This company actually invented the first digital camera back in 1975. They had the technology in their hands, decades before anyone else. But instead of embracing it, Kodak dismissed the idea, fearing it would threaten their film business. They chose comfort over change, security over risk. And while they clung to the old model, competitors raced ahead with digital photography. Kodak eventually declared bankruptcy in 2012, a giant brought down not by failure, but by mental stagnation. These stories reveal something deeper. Billionaires don't fear failure nearly as much as they fear stagnation. Failure teaches lessons, exposes weaknesses, and pushes growth. Stagnation, on the other hand, teaches nothing. It feels safe, but it silently erodes the drive that creates progress. Think about it this way. A failed experiment forces you to adapt. A stagnant routine convinces you that no adaptation is necessary. That's why billionaires see mental complacency as more dangerous than losing billions in a market crash. A crash can be reversed, but a stagnant mind is far harder to reignite. Psychologically, complacency thrives in moments of success. It whispers, "You've done enough. Why push further?" And because the brain craves comfort, most people listen. But billionaires train themselves to resist that voice. They deliberately step out of comfort zones, embrace disruption, and surround themselves with people who challenge their thinking. They know the cost of comfort is greater than the cost of failure. This is the critical insight. The difference between billionaires and the average person isn't that billionaires never feel complacent. It's that they recognize it as a threat and act before it takes root. They disrupt themselves before the world disrupts them. So now you've seen how billionaires rise above the average person, and you've uncovered the silent enemy they fear most: mental complacency. But here's the truth. Simply knowing the enemy isn't enough. The real question is, how do the world's richest actually fight it? Day after day, when the temptation to relax is stronger than ever. In part 2, we'll go inside their daily routines, their boldest decisions, and the exact strategies they use to keep their minds sharper than their competitors. This is the part that separates billionaires from everyone else, and it might just change the way you see your own future. Wait for part 2 because the real secrets are only just beginning.